Hi and welcome everybody. My name is Jericho and this is going to be the 5th episode of the Angst Podcast. For this topic, I just want to ask you guys a question to start off, and that's who are you? And I mean that honestly. I want you to ask yourselves, who are you? I mean, there's going to be a lot of different ways we can describe it, and everybody's going to have their own unique individual answers. But for most of us, we're probably going to start simple. Like I already said, my name is Jericho. I could tell you guys that I'm from Canada. You probably have guessed that I'm a boy. Or at least I relate to boys, depending on what your transgender beliefs are. And yeah, I mean, I could make a big list of qualities or characteristics or personality traits I view in myself, and I could describe that to you. If you're thinking about the question now, you're going to have your own list. But what if I asked other people in your lives? What if I asked your friends, your family, your spouse, your kid, your nephew, the person that was at the grocery store last week? Would they remember you even? And if they did, how would they describe you? They wouldn't know your name more than likely. But they could have a couple of traits, and that would be a version of yourself that they had seen. But the problem is, if everybody has a different version of you, then there's a lot of different versions walking around. I mean, who I am when I'm with, the guys or the bros, and maybe we're at the gym and we're goofing off, the way that they view me or the way that I interact with those people is way different than I would interact with my grandmother. Or how I would interact with my sister or my girlfriend. And it's not because I'm putting on a persona or I'm phony or any of that stuff. It's just because those people know who I am for different reasons. They have different thoughts of me. They understand different things about me. They've had different experiences with me. And I mean, that's going to change their interactions. There's nothing I can do about it. I can try to be the most honest and true Jericho that I can. But everybody's going to have their own perception of how I come off. And depending on, the emotional state I'm in or the life state I'm in, maybe some of those interactions may be negative. I would hopefully not describe that many negative characteristics about myself. Maybe I've treated somebody poorly in some interaction in the past. And so that Jericho's a douchebag to that clerk or that, service worker. Or maybe I was having a rough day, whatever it is, that interaction was different. And the persona, who I am to that person, is different. It's kind of like if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? When it hits the ground, I guess the principle of this idea would be that there needs to be some antenna or some person, recording device or entity to interact with the tree hitting the earth. Otherwise, why would it make a sound? It doesn't have to. That's kind of the basis of the question, right? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is kind of similar in a sense, is if whoever you are is a list of variables that only you know because you've been in your own mind and your own interactions the whole time. Well, I mean, who you are is pretty specific then, isn't it? Because who you are to your little brother or to your older sister is entirely different. They view you as your own person, and they've seen your decisions and they've missed some decisions. So they may think of you as an entirely unique individual, as they do. I don't want to ever get over my head here, but I do want to introduce kind of an interesting concept that I've read about called solipsism. For those of you that don't know, it's the idea that only one self can be proven to exist, since you're the only one that's interacting with it. By that, I mean, essentially, you're the only validity of life or consciousness you have. You don't have my thoughts. You don't have your mom's thoughts. You don't have anybody else's memories. You've only ever seen out of your first-person perspective. You can't really prove that I'm not a robot or that anybody around you is not a robot. And I mean, obviously, we try and we relate to one another, and it seems maybe that's not the case. But it might be, because we don't have proof otherwise. It's just not possible. It's kind of an interesting idea. Everybody that you interact with might not be real. And if they are real, well, then you're only interacting with a version of them that you have kind of made up, because you don't fully know everything about that person. You've made up who you view them as, or your interactions have made up who you view them as. I should maybe rephrase. This is going to lead me to something I like to call the internet problem. I think that there's a certain thing going on in a digital age where there's a missed opportunity to know people correctly. So by that, I mean, if you're going to communicate outside of a person-to-person interaction, if you're going to send a text message, if you're going to make a comment on the internet, if you're going to, talk over the phone even, I guess we could argue, although I do believe there's benefits in listening to somebody. What's going to occur here is it's going to be hard to read the way that person's thinking. You don't know if maybe you send a text to a spouse, let's say, and maybe you guys are having a little bit of a fight. Well, the problem with sending digital messages back and forth is the way that you interpret the intent of that person's thoughts is going to be different. If I'm at the gym laughing with my buddies, but I'm having a fight via text message, my emotional brain is kind of all over the place, right? Like, how are my responses? I'm not in the moment. I'm not having the argument. And so I'm kind of only giving a little bit of thought to it. I'm only giving a certain amount of me to it. And the way I come off might be totally different for her or him, depending on who you are. Because maybe, you're sitting in a business meeting at the time and you're trying to maintain professionality and you're speaking, but at the same time you have this text message. So your professional tone may come off in the text message when it's kind of not supposed to be professional. Maybe it's supposed to be emotional. Anyways, guys, I'm ranting. But the point is that in a digital age, you don't always know what that person's dealing with, since you're not dealing with them in real time, where you can listen to their tone, you can see their expressions, you can actually have their thoughts present in the moment as they're coming out for yourself. Instead, you have delayed responses over the internet and at times with strangers even. It's kind of funny because, that's the business in theory I'm trying to get into right now. The internet business, the YouTube business. And in theory, some of the individuals listening to this show don't know who I am. For those of you that do, shout out. Thanks for listening, guys. But for those of you that don't, and we've never met, there's only one version of myself that you know, and that's the version that comes out through these videos. And that's only a small part of me, right? That's only one part of Jericho. That's the Angst Jericho. And it's going to be a little bit different than the regular Jericho, right? An analogy I kind of want to maybe tie to, if you're not getting what I'm saying here, is I live in Canada. So we have 4 seasons here, and I've been driving for a couple of years now. And I've noticed something as I've gone along my driving career. In the wintertime, I'm limited to using a turn signal. So if I'm stuck in traffic and I need to get in, obviously I throw a signal on. And it's Canada, so we're pretty nice. A lot of people let you in. But they don't always. You get the occasional guy that cuts you off or there's not enough room or whatever goes down. And what I've noticed is that in the summer, I actually kind of like to open up the windows a bit, get the sunroof down, let the fresh air in. I don't get to do that all year. I only get to capitalize on a couple of months. So I take advantage. So if I'm stuck in traffic in the summer and the windows are down, I get this little bit of a benefit that I can kind of throw out a hand, like a quick left hand wave coming in. How you doing? Thanks, bud. And I have no scientific data to back this up other than my own experiences, but it seems to kind of work. It seems to me that when somebody views a hand or a person in the car or making a friendly gesture, a hello, thank you gesture, it's easier to justify your decision to let that guy in. Because at least what you know about that person is that there is a person in that car and they're appreciative of your actions. In the wintertime, what occurs is that I throw on a blinker and some guy that's in his own world is late for work or pissed off about work or coming home and he's tired, doesn't see me, doesn't notice me, doesn't really think about the guy in the car and sees a blinker and says, fuck it, I need to get home. We've all been there, right? Everybody's had that moment in their lives where, there's that interaction when driving and it almost seems animalistic. I'm going to point a finger and I'm going to say it's because there's not the person-to-person visibility there. I think that what's happening is you see these big boxed machines and these big vehicles and they're objects in your way. They're not people. They're not people that you're interacting with or know anything about. They're Toyotas and Fords and fucking pedophile vans that are getting in your way as you're trying to get home from a long day. And I think that's an issue. In the digital age, a lot of our interactions aren't necessarily in person. And because of that, I think tonality is lost. I think meaning behind our words or the emotions behind our sentences maybe get mixed up in what words come on the page when that person reads them as opposed to how they would have meant when I said them in person. And I think that's kind of dangerous. I think that it causes a lot of anxiety for people. I think it can cause some stress and some maybe frustrations for some people. I've seen it happen. I've had it happen to myself. And I think it's kind of a state of chaos we find ourselves in. An example of this I would say is like the dark humor side of the internet, like maybe memes we could look at. If you go to the subreddit, if anybody uses Reddit and you want to go to the subreddit, I'm going to hell for this. There are some pretty dark posts on there. There are some pretty, racist, rude, dark, sad humor memes on that subreddit. But if you are a Reddit user and an internet user and you like memes and you don't mind going on the internet to have a good time and some laughs, then you understand the culture and the environment and the way that it's supposed to be taken. There are some people that do not understand that though, and they get very, very offended with things that they see on the internet. And that's kind of tough because they're jokes. A lot of the times they're jokes. And obviously I'm speaking openly here. I mean, obviously I'm stereotyping case by case. There are some times where things are posted not as jokes and they are harmful. And I do understand the cyberbullying aspect. But for the most part, if you go to a website and see something that offends you or is taken out of context, like a sound bit, a quote, whatever it may be of somebody, you can manipulate the tone of what that person maybe meant or how they meant to come across or what that meme was meant to do, which was create a few laughs or be in a dark humored environment, and it's taken out of context. And I think that creates a lot of issues in our society right now. I think that with the internet growing the way that it does and so many of our interactions being digital, we need to be wary of that. Which kind of leads me to my next point, because I've just spent a couple minutes talking about the issue with people on the internet talking. But I just want to take a moment to defend people who podcast, because I think what's really cool about the podcast world is that it's a new free-form way of thinking. I think that in the past, people who had tuned into, televisions, news networks, talk shows, whatever it may be, were getting quick little bits of information, whatever, maybe got in ratings, whatever was appropriate for the advertisers that would be allowed, whatever was in the television regulations and the parental guidelines and audience guidelines. And I think that there was a lot of influence that went into those domains of thinking or talking or expressing ideas. And I think for the first time, with the internet available to us and all this information, you can actually sit down and listen to somebody speak for multiple videos when they don't have big company corporate interests. I mean, they're people that can start a podcast just because of the internet. I mean, they can put information out there. And if you like what you hear, you can stay and you can listen and you can enjoy it. And if you disagree, you can maybe have a conversation or leave. And I mean, that's the freedom of it, right? And I think that's kind of cool. I think that as long as people understand that there are good people trying to spread good ideas, and you go and you fish out those resources, and then you find the ones that you trust, because it's not just made up of sound bits and quotes and what gets headlines. It's actually made up of people that you deem trustworthy or ideas that you deem beneficial or logical or useful in your own life. And I think that's cool. I think people should be filling their heads more with that type of information and time than just whatever channel 24 decides to play for them all day. But thanks, guys. I appreciate you tuning in for this week's episode, and we'll see you next time.